Disaster. At Christmas dinner in my son's home, a sudden wave of illness struck me. Shaking, I made my way to the kitchen to get some water and spotted a small, empty vial. Realizing what it was, a chill went through me. I dialed 911, and the gulf between a festive family meal and a horrifying truth changed our lives forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The evening documentary droned on about space exploration when the piercing ring of the telephone shattered the quiet of my living room. I fumbled for my reading glasses, peering at the caller ID. Kevin, my son, almost never called this late on a work night. Dad. His voice was unsteady, like a teenager's, though he was 44. I need your help. Right now. The raw urgency in his words made me sit up straight in my comfortable leather armchair. The mug of tea beside me was long cold, forgotten like everything else when anxiety takes over. What's wrong, son? A tense silence stretched between us, punctuated only by his uneven breathing. Over the line I could hear him pacing, quick, nervous steps across what I assumed was his kitchen floor, 40 minutes away in Evanston. I lost money, Dad. A lot of it. His voice sank to a whisper. $60,000. My grip tightened on the phone. $60,000. That was more than my entire annual pension. How? An online investment scheme. The words came out laced with bitterness and self-recrimination. I thought I was being clever, diversifying our assets. Sarah doesn't have a clue. The grandfather clock ticked away, each second feeling like an eternity. On the TV, a meteorologist promised a blizzard by Christmas. The world went on as normal while my son's was falling apart. Kevin, just slow down. Tell me everything that happened. More pacing, the sound of a chair scraping on tile. It was this investment opportunity, digital currency they called it. The projected returns were unbelievable, 40% in just a few months. I used our emergency savings, the kids' college fund. I even borrowed against the house, my chest constricted. You took out a second mortgage? Not the whole thing, just a home equity loan, $30,000. His voice broke entirely. Dad, they're calling in the debt. The lenders, they said if I don't produce the money by February 1st, they'll initiate foreclosure. I got to my feet, my old knees aching in protest. The living room suddenly felt suffocating, the walls closing in. Across the street, Mrs. Kim's holiday lights blinked merrily, a stark reminder that other families were getting ready for the holidays, not financial ruin. Have you spoken to an attorney? There might be options. I can't pay for an attorney. Kevin's voice rose, panic eclipsing his shame. I can hardly pay for groceries. Don't you see what's happening? They could seize our house. Sarah and the kids would be on the street. The image was a punch to the gut. My daughter-in-law's kind face. Little Lily asking why they had to leave their home. 8-year-old Leo wondering if it was his fault. Children should never bear the weight of their parents' failures. There must be something we can do, I said, more to myself than to Kevin. I have some money saved. Maybe. Dad, you're not listening. His voice turned sharp, dismissive. This isn't a few $100s. This is major league money, life-altering money. The tone hurt. When did my son start talking to me as if I were a child, as if my modest pension and carefully managed savings were somehow beneath his notice? I'm just trying to help, Kevin. I know you are, he said with a shaky exhale. But I need real help, significant help, the kind of help that solves the problem. A burst of static crackled on the line. Outside, a car door slammed. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary night in a neighborhood where sons didn't call their fathers to beg for a bailout from their own folly. But Kevin was still my son, and for all his faults, the bad decisions, the hint of entitlement in his voice, he was still the boy who used to help me rake leaves in this very yard, who sobbed when his hamster died, who called me his hero. Tell me what you need, I said softly. The ensuing silence was too long enough for me to understand that this was all leading to something specific. The whole conversation, the strategic release of information, the focus on the children's welfare, had a very particular destination. Dad. Kevin's voice shifted again, becoming softer, almost gentle. But underneath it, I detected something else, something that made my stomach knot with a sudden dread. I'm listening. There's one way you could fix this. One real solution that would make everything right. The way he stressed the words, real solution, made my blood run cold. I stood frozen by my armchair, the phone pressed so hard to my ear it ached. Whatever Kevin was about to propose, I already knew I was going to hate it. What kind of solution? Well, he cleared his throat, and I could picture him running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy, planning something mischievous. You're always complaining about how much work that big house is, right? The utility bills, the roof maintenance, the yard work. My hand tightened on the receiver. Kevin, what are you suggesting? The house has to be worth at least $400,000 now, probably more, given how property values are soaring. And you're rattling around in there all by yourself, Dad. It's just too much for a man your age. A man my age? The words came out with more bite than I'd intended. I'm 70, not 100, but be practical about it. His voice took on that condescending, explaining to a child tone that always set my teeth on edge. You live in 4 bedrooms alone. The upkeep is draining your pension. And frankly, wouldn't you be happier someplace smaller, with fewer responsibilities? I slumped back into my chair as the awful understanding washed over me. You want me to sell my home? It would solve everything for both of us, Kevin said quickly, as if the speed of his words could mask their audacity. You could get a nice little condo, one of those senior living places with social events and meal services. You'd be around people your own age, no more worrying about clogged gutters or shoveling snow, and the leftover cash would cover your investment losses. It wasn't an investment loss, Dad. It was a calculated risk. I shot up from my chair again, fury building inside me like a pressure cooker. This is my home, Kevin. This is where your mother and I lived for 37 years, where we raised you, where she passed away. Mom's been gone 3 years, he said, his voice turning cold and clinical. She's not going to come back just because you've preserved her bedroom like a museum. The cruelty of the remark was like a physical blow. I literally staggered, reaching out to the wall for support. How dare you? I'm being realistic. You're being sentimental about a piece of property. A piece of property? My voice rose, echoing off the walls of this piece of property. These walls held every significant memory of my life. This is where your mother planted her garden, where we had Christmas with you every single year until you were married, where she taught you how to ride a bike in the driveway. And now it's just a financial liability. Kevin's patience was clearly wearing thin, his desperation showing through the veneer of manipulation. Dad, be honest. When was the last time you even went upstairs? When was the last time you had anyone over for dinner in that formal dining room? I thought of Eleanor's sewing room, untouched since her death. The way the morning sun still fell on her reading chair, the kitchen where she had made me coffee every morning for nearly 4 decades. You don't get it, I said quietly. I get that you're being selfish. The accusation hit like a slap. My family's about to be homeless, and you're worried about preserving a shrine to a past that's over. Mom is gone, Dad. Don't you dare talk to me about your mother. She would want you to help us. She would want you to protect her grandchildren. But you're so lost in your precious memories that you can't see beyond your own feelings. My chest was on fire. The room started to spin. Kevin's voice was relentless. Think about Lily and Leo. Think about Sarah. Do they mean less to you than your empty rooms and old photo albums? That's not fair, and you know it. What's not fair is that my kids might end up on the street while my father sits on a house worth a fortune, too stubborn to do the sensible thing. The sensible thing. As if selling the home where I'd built my entire life was just another line item on a spreadsheet. As if Eleanor's memory could be boxed up and shipped to some sterile apartment complex for people waiting to die. The answer is no. Silence. Then what? No, Kevin. I will not sell my house to fix your mistakes. My mistakes? His voice turned vicious. You mean my effort to build a better life for my family? To give your grandchildren the opportunities you never gave me? I gave you everything I had, everything except the one thing I actually need from you. God, you're just like Mom always said, quick with the advice, but tight with the wallet. The lie was so stunning that I was speechless. Eleanor had never said anything like that. She was proud of our hard work, of how we'd saved to give Kevin a better start than we'd ever had. Your mother never. Enjoy your empty house, Dad. Enjoy your precious memories. I hope they provide some comfort when you're dying all alone in that place. The line went dead. I stood there holding the receiver, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry hornet. My hands were trembling. My entire body was trembling. Slowly, I placed the phone back on its cradle. The silence that filled the room felt different from the usual peaceful quiet of my evenings. This silence was empty, fragile, the kind that follows an explosion. I sank back into my chair, but my body wouldn't relax. Every muscle was coiled, braced for another impact. Kevin's words echoed in the void, dying all alone in that place, as if this house, this home, was a prison instead of the sanctuary Eleanor and I had created. I looked around the living room through his eyes, trying to see what he saw. The furniture was dated, but well cared for. The carpet showed the paths of 30 years of life. The mantel was covered in family pictures, Kevin's graduation, his wedding, the kids' school photos. Was it just a museum? My feet carried me to the kitchen on autopilot, perhaps drawn by the need to be where Eleanor's presence felt the strongest. The oak table where we'd shared breakfast for decades. The window above the sink where she'd stood washing dishes, humming her favorite songs. The phone rang again, and my heart leaped. Kevin, calling to apologize, but the caller ID displayed George Peterson's number. Bob, you sound awful. What happened? George lived a few doors down. He'd been my closest friend since before Eleanor got sick. We'd worked at Boeing together for 15 years and retired around the same time. If anyone could understand, it was George. Kevin called, I said, and those two words conveyed the whole story. Ah, let me guess. He's in a jam. How did you, George? I've known that kid since he was 7 years old, stealing apples from my backyard. He's always been reckless. What's he done this time? I told George everything. The failed investment, the threat of foreclosure, the demand for the house. When I got to Kevin's final words about me dying alone, George made a sound of disgust. That little manipulator. Using your grandchildren as a weapon, then turning on you when it fails. But what if he's right? The thought had been eating at me since the call ended. Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe. Stop that right now. George's voice was sharp. You raised him, sent him to college, helped with the down payment on his house. You don't owe him your home just because he made a stupid, greedy decision. But the children have parents who should have considered them before gambling their college fund on a get-rich-quick fantasy. This isn't on you, Bob. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down heavily. Through the window I could see George's porch light casting a warm glow. It was strange how a neighbor could offer more comfort than my own son. He said Eleanor would want me to help them. Eleanor would want you to help if you could, but she would also want you to maintain your dignity and keep your home. She would be furious with Kevin for even suggesting it. The truth of that resonated deeply. Eleanor had adored Kevin, but she had zero tolerance for manipulation or emotional blackmail. She would have seen right through his act. What do I do, George? Nothing. At least not right now. Don't make any choices while you're this upset. Kevin will probably call back tomorrow, either to say he's sorry or to try a new tactic. Just give yourself time to think. After we hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. The furnace cycled on. The familiar sounds of the house had been my companions for 40 years. I considered Kevin's proposal, a senior community with planned activities and meal services. The idea made my skin crawl. Forced fun with strangers, eating institutional food, living in a small apartment designed for efficiency, not comfort. Then I thought about Christmas, just 3 weeks away. For the past 3 years, since Eleanor's passing, Kevin's family had come here, Lily and Leo opening gifts under the tree, Sarah helping me in this kitchen, Kevin pretending to like my coffee. Would this be the final Christmas in our home? Would Kevin's rage poison that tradition, too? I took out the photo albums Eleanor had meticulously kept, turning pages filled with memories. Our wedding day, so young and hopeful. Kevin's first steps on this very floor, birthday parties in the yard. Eleanor in her garden beaming with pride over her prize-winning roses. Every room in this house contained a piece of our life together. They weren't shrines, as Kevin had claimed, but the very foundation of who I am. How could I make him understand that selling this house would be like selling my own history? George was right about one thing. I couldn't make any decisions tonight. But as I closed the albums and switched off the kitchen light, I knew a fundamental shift had occurred between Kevin and me, something that might never be repaired. The little boy who used to help me rake leaves had become a man willing to sacrifice his father's peace for money, and I wasn't sure I could ever forgive him for that. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night replaying Kevin's cruel accusations, George's sound advice, and my own wounded feelings. By 10 o'clock the next morning, I was back in my armchair with my third coffee, staring at the phone as if it held the answers. The bank statements I'd retrieved from my desk were spread across the coffee table. $18,000 in savings, my monthly pension of $2,900. Not much by Kevin's standards, but it was honest money, earned over 40 years of aerospace engineering. Maybe I'd been too harsh. Maybe there was room for a compromise. I picked up the phone and dialed Kevin's number before I could change my mind. It rang twice before he answered. Dad. He sounded preoccupied, probably having breakfast. Kevin. I cleared my throat, choosing my words with care. I've been thinking about our talk last night. I think we got off on the wrong foot. A pause. I heard Sarah asking something in the background, Kevin shushing her. Look, I can't give you $60,000, I said, but I went through my accounts. I have $18,000 I can spare. It's not the whole amount, but it's a start. The silence stretched so long I thought the line had dropped. 18,000. Kevin's voice held the same dismissive tone as before. Dad, that's not even a third of what I need. I know it's not everything, but it would ease the immediate pressure. It could buy you some time to negotiate a payment plan with your lenders. Payment plan? Kevin laughed, but there was no humor in it. These aren't credit card companies, Dad. These are serious people. They want all their money now. I gripped my coffee mug tighter. Well, what if I co-signed a new loan? My credit's still perfect. Or we could look into a partial refinance on my house. Stop. Kevin's voice cut in sharply. Just stop with the small-time solutions. I don't need a few thousand here or there. I need real money, substantial money. 18,000 is substantial to me. That's the whole problem. Your definition of substantial and the real world's are completely different. My chest tightened. Kevin, I am trying to help you. No, you're trying to make yourself feel better by offering me pocket change. Do you have any idea what $60,000 even looks like? Your 18,000 is pathetic. The word landed like a punch. Pathetic. My life savings, painstakingly accumulated over decades of frugal living, dismissed as pathetic by my own son. Maybe if you hadn't gambled away your family's future, don't you dare lecture me on responsibility from your ivory tower. You've been coasting on your pension and Mom's life insurance for 3 years, wandering around a house that's worth more than most people earn in a decade. Your mother's life insurance barely covered her final medical expenses. The point is you have real options. You're just too selfish to consider them. There was that word again. Selfish. As if my desire to keep the home where I'd built my entire life was a moral failing. I offered you what I could afford, I said quietly. What you could afford without being inconvenienced? What about what I can afford? What about what your grandchildren can afford when we're living out of our car? You're not going to be living out of your car. How do you know that? How do you know anything about the mess we're in? You sit in your cozy house with your cozy pension, passing these cozy judgments on other people's desperation. I stood and walked to the kitchen window. Outside, the winter morning light made everything look bleak and cold. "Kevin, please, let's just discuss this calmly." "I am calm. I'm just explaining basic arithmetic to someone who apparently doesn't grasp it. 18,000 doesn't fix a $60,000 problem. A co-signed loan doesn't help someone with ruined credit. Your little gestures are meaningless. They're not meaningless to me. That's because you can't comprehend the scale of real-world problems. You live in a bubble where 18,000 seems like a lot because you've never faced a serious financial crisis. The injustice of it took my breath away. I'd worked construction in the summers to pay for my engineering degree. Eleanor and I had lived on canned soup for months when Kevin was born, saving every cent for him. We drove the same car for 12 years and wore our winter coats until they were threadbare. "I've faced plenty of financial crises," I said. "Your mother and I, that was 50 years ago. The world is different. Money is different. If you don't have real money to offer, then don't waste my time with these pretend offers of help." Real money. Anything less was apparently play money, not worthy of his attention. So unless I sell my house, I'm just wasting your time. Finally, you get it. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, until the dial tone became unbearable. I let my hand drop, and the receiver clattered onto the kitchen floor. My coffee was cold. My hands were shaking again. And somewhere deep inside me, something had shattered that I knew could never be pieced back together. The next 4 days were a blur of disbelief and a grim, growing understanding. I wandered through the house, touching Eleanor's things, her reading glasses on the nightstand, her favorite mug in the cabinet, the quilt she'd made draped over the sofa. Each morning I walked through her garden, where the rose bushes stood bare, their branches like arthritic fingers reaching for the gray sky. This was where she had been happiest, coaxing life from the earth. Now it all lay dormant, waiting for spring. But some things, I was learning, never woke up. On the third day, George knocked on my kitchen door. "You look like hell," he said, taking his usual seat with his own mug. "Feel worse." "Kevin again?" I recounted the second phone call, Kevin's dismissal of my savings as pathetic pocket change. George listened patiently, shaking his head. "My brother-in-law was just like that," George said when I was done. "Always viewed family as a line of credit. It started small, 100 here, 200 there. Then it grew to thousands. Finally, he wanted us to mortgage our home for his new business venture." "What did you do?" Said, "No." He didn't speak to us for 2 years. George sipped his coffee. Best 2 years of our marriage, honestly. I stared out at the frosted bird bath Eleanor had loved. But Kevin's my son. Kevin's a 44-year-old man who made 44-year-old decisions. You didn't make him gamble away his family's security. It wasn't gambling, it was investing. George arched an eyebrow. Tomato, tomato. The point is, his bad choices don't create an obligation for you. That afternoon I sat in my study, surrounded by our legal papers, my will, insurance policies, the deed to the house. Eleanor and I had been so meticulous with our finances, so focused on building a secure future. We'd planned for medical bills, home repairs, even long-term care. We had never planned for our son to treat us like an ATM. I opened the will and read the passage about Kevin's inheritance. Everything would eventually go to him. The house, the savings, Eleanor's jewelry, but eventually wasn't fast enough. He wanted his inheritance now, while I was still alive. The realization was a shock of cold water. Kevin didn't see me as his father anymore. He saw me as an obstacle between him and his money. That evening, George called to check in. "I keep thinking about what you said," I told him. "About family being a source of funding. Is that all I am to him now? What do you think?" I thought about Kevin's tone when he'd called my savings pathetic, the casual cruelty of dismissing 40 years of careful planning as meaningless, the way he'd hung up the second I refused to sell the house. "I think my son is gone," I said softly, "and I have no idea who this person is in his place. Desperate people show you who they really are, George said. Sometimes desperation just brings out what was there all along. You think Kevin was always this selfish? I think Kevin was always spoiled. You and Eleanor gave him everything, paid for college, helped with his down payment, bought gifts for the kids every year. He's never had to face a real consequence for a bad choice. The truth in that stung. We had made things easy for Kevin, perhaps too easy. What would Eleanor say about all this? I asked. George was quiet for a moment. Eleanor would be heartbroken, but she would also be furious at Kevin for how he's treating you. She'd tell you to protect yourself. After we hung up, I walked through the house one last time. Every room held a memory of the family Kevin claimed I was selfish for preserving. His first steps in the hall, birthday parties in the dining room, Christmas mornings by the tree. But those were memories of a different Kevin. A boy who helped me in the yard, who cried when his pet died, who hugged me tight after I taught him to ride his bike. That boy had grown into a man who called his father's life savings pathetic. Standing in Eleanor's sewing room, I came to a decision. I would not sell my house to finance Kevin's mistakes, but I also wouldn't let him destroy what was left of our relationship with his demands and his cruelty. The next time he called, I would have an answer that protected both my home and my self-respect. I just hoped I'd have the strength to stick to it. December 21st came with a bitter cold that seeped into your bones. I was stirring a pot of soup for dinner when the phone rang, its shrill sound cutting through the kitchen's warmth like a blast of winter air. Kevin's name flashed on the screen. My hand paused over the phone as George's warnings replayed in my mind. 5 days had passed since Kevin's brutal dismissal of my help. 5 days of silence that had, surprisingly, brought a sense of peace. On the fourth ring, I picked up. Dad. Kevin's voice was different, softer, almost hesitant. I'm glad you answered. I said nothing, waiting. Look, I owe you an apology, a huge one. He paused, and I could hear Sarah moving around in the background, the distant chatter of children. I was completely out of line the other day. Stress makes you say horrible things, but that's not an excuse. Still, I was silent. Something about his words felt scripted, too carefully constructed. Dad, are you there? I'm here. I've been thinking about what you said about finding other solutions. Maybe you were right. Maybe I was being too aggressive. Aggressive. That was a mild way to put it. The thing is, Kevin went on, his voice warming with what seemed like real emotion, Christmas is in 4 days. Sarah's been cooking for a week, and the kids won't stop asking about Grandpa Bob. They want to show you what they made in school, tell you what's on their Christmas lists. Through the phone, I heard a child's voice. Leo, probably, shouting something about Santa. The normal family sounds tugged at a part of my heart I had tried to wall off. I know I hurt you, Kevin said softly. I know I said things that were cruel, but Dad, it's Christmas. Please come for dinner. Let's just be a family again. The invitation hung between us. Part of me, the grandfather, the man who remembered Kevin as a sweet boy, wanted to accept instantly. But George's voice echoed in my head, warning me about manipulation, about people who turn on the kindness only when they want something. I don't know, Kevin. Please. His voice cracked slightly. The kids keep asking why Grandpa can't come. What am I supposed to say? That adults sometimes say stupid things they don't mean? The guilt hit me, sharp and immediate. Lily and Leo didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. They were just innocent children who loved their grandfather. Have you told Sarah about the money? A pause. Some of it. She knows we're having a tough time, so not the whole truth. But that was his decision to make. Dad, I promise. No talk about money, no pressure, just a family dinner, just Christmas. The kids have presents for you. Little things they made, a handmade gift. The thought of my granddaughter carefully working on something for me nearly broke through my defenses. Sarah's making her famous beef Wellington, Kevin continued. Remember how much you liked it last year? She's been planning this for weeks. I could picture it all, the The warm kitchen, the sound of children laughing, the happy chaos of a family gathering. It had been my favorite day of the year since Eleanor passed. "I won't take no for an answer," Kevin said, his tone now playful, like it used to be when he was a boy asking to stay up late. The kids would be devastated if Grandpa missed Christmas. I heard Sarah in the background calling something about setting the table. I heard one of the kids ask if Grandpa was coming. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the stress really had made Kevin act out of character. Maybe Christmas dinner was the first step toward healing. "What time?" I heard myself say. 4 o'clock, and Dad, thank you. This means the world to us. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen, watching steam rise from my forgotten soup. Something about Kevin's sudden reversal still felt off, but the thought of seeing Lily and Leo was stronger than my caution. 4 days until Christmas dinner. 4 days to wonder if I was walking into a trap. December 22nd was crisp and bright, the winter sun pouring through my windows like a promise. For the first time in days, the knot of anxiety in my stomach was gone. Kevin's apology, whether genuine or not, had opened the door to seeing Lily and Leo, and I was filled with an anticipation I hadn't felt in years. While the coffee brewed, I found myself humming one of Eleanor's favorite carols. The tune was rusty, but it felt right. I took out my calendar and circled December 24th in red ink, admiring it like a kid counting down the days. The downtown toy store was a hive of last-minute shoppers. I navigated the aisles, carefully considering each toy, just as Eleanor had taught me. For Lily, I chose a microscope kit. She was always so curious about how the world worked. For Leo, a complex Lego architecture set, something we could build together. At the register, the cashier smiled. "Lucky grandkids." "I hope so," I said, and I meant it more than she knew. That evening, George showed up at my door unannounced, his face etched with the kind of concern usually reserved for a bad diagnosis. "You're making a mistake," he said, taking his usual chair. "Good to see you too, George." "I'm serious, Bob. Something about Kevin's sudden apology doesn't sit right." I poured him a coffee. "People can change. Stress makes us do things we regret." "Stress reveals who we are," George countered, leaning forward. "Think about the timing. He calls you pathetic, hangs up on you, ignores you for 5 days, and then suddenly he's full of Christmas spirit. Maybe he talked to Sarah. Maybe she set him straight. Or maybe he realized that insulting you wasn't working." The words stung because a part of me feared the same thing. But the alternative, believing my son was irredeemable, was too painful to consider. "The children have been asking for me," I said. "Kevin told me." George's expression softened. "I know you miss them, Bob." But manipulative people use whatever works, even innocent kids. After George left, I spent the evening with my photo albums, looking at pictures of Kevin as a boy. Birthday parties where he seemed so happy, Christmas mornings where his face lit up with pure joy. That sweet child had to still be in there somewhere, buried beneath the angry man who had called my life savings pathetic. December 23rd, I decided to tackle Eleanor's apple pie recipe. Her neat handwriting filled the yellowed index card with precise instructions. My hands shook a little as I measured the flour, remembering how she had guided me the first time I'd tried to help. The kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg, and for a few hours the house felt alive again, as if Eleanor might walk in at any moment. When the pie came out of the oven, golden and perfect, I almost cried. That night I wrapped the gifts with the same care Eleanor had always shown. Sharp corners, perfect bows, gift tags written in my best script. Lily and Leo deserved to feel special. My phone rang as I was tying the last ribbon. "How are the preparations coming, Dad?" Kevin sounded genuinely cheerful. "Good. I made your mother's apple pie. The kids will be so excited." They were just asking about Grandma's cooking. The warmth in his voice melted my remaining doubts. This was my son, the boy who had helped me in the garden, who had cried at his mother's funeral. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," I said. "We all are." 4 o'clock sharp. "And Dad, thank you for giving us another chance." After we hung up, I laid out my clothes for Christmas Eve. The red sweater Eleanor had knitted for me, pressed trousers, the tie Kevin had given me 2 years ago for Father's Day. Everything had to be just right. Standing in my bedroom, I saw my reflection in Eleanor's mirror. An old man getting ready to see his family, hope and fear warring in his eyes. George's warnings still echoed in my head, but I pushed them away. Some risks had to be taken, especially for the sake of innocent children. Tomorrow, I would find out if my son had truly changed, or if George had been right all along. Christmas Eve was gray and cold, but my mood was bright as I loaded the presents into my car. The 40-minute drive to Kevin's townhouse flew by, my mind filled with thoughts of my grandchildren and a quiet hope for reconciliation. Kevin's neighborhood was postcard perfect, with identical mailboxes and twinkling Christmas lights on every house. His home was at the end of a cul-de-sac adorned with wreaths and garlands that Sarah had likely spent days arranging. I gathered the gifts from the back seat, taking a deep breath of the cold air before walking to the door. Through the frosted glass, I could hear the excited shouts of children. Kevin opened the door before I could even knock, a wide, genuine-looking smile on his face. "Dad, you're right on time." He pulled me into a hug that felt surprisingly real. "The kids have been glued to the window waiting for you." Before I could answer, Lily burst out from behind him, her dark hair flying as she wrapped her arms around my legs. "Grandpa, we missed you." Leo appeared a moment later, more reserved but grinning from ear to ear. "Did you bring any magic tricks?" Mom said you might. A pure, uncomplicated warmth spread through my chest. These children loved me without agenda or calculation. Their affection was the most honest thing I had felt in months. "Let's see what Santa brought for you two," I said, lifting the gift bags. The living room was a blaze of holiday cheer with a tall, heavily decorated tree, stockings on the mantel, and soft Christmas music playing. Sarah came out from the kitchen wearing an apron dusted with flour, her smile warm but her eyes tense. "Bob, it's so good to see you." Her hug was brief, and she avoided my gaze. "Dinner's almost ready. Beef Wellington, just how you like it. Smells wonderful." I handed her Eleanor's apple pie. I thought this might be a nice addition. Her eyes lit up with what seemed like real pleasure. "The kids will be thrilled." They're always asking about Grandma Eleanor's recipes. Opening presents was a happy chaos. Lily squealed with delight over the microscope kit, immediately trying to examine the test tubes. Leo studied the Lego set with intense focus, tracing the designs with his finger. "Can we build it together, Grandpa?" "Absolutely. Next time you visit, we'll get started." Kevin watched it all with a look of paternal pride, taking pictures with his phone. "Family photo time," he announced, arranging us all by the tree. This might be our best Christmas ever. Standing there with my arm around Kevin, Lily and Leo pressed against my sides, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't felt since Eleanor died. George's warning seemed foolish now. This was my family, imperfect but real, and we were together. Dinner preparations moved us to the dining room where Sarah had set a table straight out of a magazine. White linen, gold-rimmed plates, and candles reflecting in crystal glasses filled with red wine. The beef Wellington sat at the center of the table, a magnificent centerpiece. "This is beautiful, Sarah," I said, taking my seat. She bustled around, making last-minute adjustments with a nervous energy. "I just want everything to be perfect." Kevin stood at the head of the table, raising his wine glass. "Before we eat, a toast." His voice was full of solemn importance. To family, to forgiveness, and to second chances. Everyone raised their glasses, even the children with their small cups of juice. The crystal caught the candlelight, creating tiny rainbows on the tablecloth. "To family," we all echoed. The wine was delicious, rich, and smooth. I savored the taste and the moment, grateful for Kevin's change of heart, for Sarah's hospitality, and for my grandchildren's pure love. Around the table, the conversation was easy and light. Leo described his school's holiday play. Lily explained her science fair project. Kevin told funny stories from work. It was all so normal, the kind of family life Eleanor and I had always dreamed of for him. But as I reached for my water, a faint wave of dizziness washed over me, like I had stood up too fast. I blinked, blaming it on the wine and the emotion of the evening. The conversation flowed around me as I savored the feeling of family unity. Kevin carved the beef Wellington with practiced ease, while Sarah served the vegetables. The children chattered about their Christmas morning excitement. Everything felt perfectly right. "Grandpa, can I show you my clay mug after dinner?" Lily asked, bouncing in her seat. "Of course, sweetheart." I hear it's a masterpiece. The wine seemed stronger than I'd thought, leaving me feeling pleasantly warm. Or perhaps it was just the joy of being wanted again, of sitting at a family table as a welcome guest. I reached for my water glass again and noticed my hand was slightly unsteady. Just the excitement, I told myself. "Dad, you look a little flushed," Kevin noted, his voice filled with what sounded like genuine concern. "Are you okay?" "Just warm." Sarah's cooking always makes me feel right at home. But as I spoke, a sharp, twisting cramp seized my stomach. The feeling passed quickly, so I dismissed it as overindulgence from the rich food and wine. Leo was telling a story about his teacher's pet hamster when the room seemed to tilt. I gripped the table, blinking hard. The candle flames blurred into long golden streaks. "Are you sure you're all right, Bob?" Sarah's voice held a note of anxiety that seemed out of proportion to my mild discomfort. "Just need some water," I said, trying to offer a reassuring smile, but my mouth was strangely dry. Kevin half rose from his chair. "The kitchen is right through there if you need to splash some water on your face. Take your time." The cramping in my stomach returned, stronger this time, accompanied by a wave of nausea. I pressed a hand to my forehead and felt a clammy sweat. "Maybe I should," I said. I tried to stand, but sat back down abruptly as the room spun. The faces around the table became soft and blurry. "Grandpa?" Lily's voice sounded distant, though she was right across from me. "You don't look so good." "Should we call someone?" Sarah asked quietly, twisting her napkin. Kevin's voice was calm and soothing. "Dad, why don't you go to the kitchen? The excitement might just be a little overwhelming." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The nausea was building, my stomach clenching. Standing up took a conscious effort. My legs felt heavy and disconnected. "Sorry," I managed. "Don't want to spoil Christmas dinner." "You're not spoiling anything," Kevin assured me. "These things happen." The walk to the kitchen felt miles long. I braced myself against the wall as the sounds of a normal Christmas dinner continued behind me. The clinking of silverware, the children's voices, Kevin explaining that sometimes older people just need a moment. My breathing was shallow and labored. The hallway walls seemed to close in on me. I heard Sarah's voice, a hushed whisper. "Should we?" "He'll be fine," Kevin interrupted smoothly. "He just needs a minute." But I wasn't fine. Something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. My heart was pounding, but my limbs felt heavy as lead. My mouth had a strange, metallic taste. The warmth of the family dinner had curdled into something cold and terrifying. I reached the kitchen doorway, gripping the frame to steady myself. The room felt different, the shadows deeper, the surfaces farther away. The kitchen was another world, with its cool tile and harsh overhead light. I leaned against the counter, my hand clenched on the granite edge, as another wave of nausea hit. This wasn't just excitement or rich food. This was something else. I turned toward the sink, and my eye caught something on the kitchen table next to Kevin's car keys, a small, empty glass vial. My vision blurred as I tried to focus on it. A medicine bottle. Empty. The room tilted. I reached out for support. knocking a ceramic mixing bowl off the counter. It shattered on the floor. "Dad?" Kevin called from the dining room. "Everything okay in there?" I stared at the vial, my mind slowly connecting the dots. The empty vial, Kevin's keys, the wine toast, the timing. "Fine," I called back, my voice hoarse, just clumsy. But I wasn't fine. My son had poisoned me. The thought should have been impossible, but it landed with a horrifying certainty. The sudden apology, the insistence on dinner, the toast, Sarah's nervousness, the way Kevin had watched me drink. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking too badly to dial. "Need some help?" Kevin's voice was right behind me. I spun around, nearly collapsing. He stood in the doorway, his mask of concern gone. His expression was calm, calculating, almost curious. "You did this," I slurred. "You poisoned me." Kevin stepped into the kitchen, closing the door behind him. "Smart man. Figuring it out even while you're dying." "Why?" I backed away, my phone clutched uselessly in my hand. "Because you're selfish. Because you chose a ridiculous house over your own family. You chose memories over your son's future." The coldness in his voice was worse than the poison coursing through my veins. This wasn't desperation. This was premeditated murder. "The children will inherit everything once you're gone. I'm their legal guardian. They'll never have to worry about money again." I tried to dial 911, but Kevin was too fast. He plucked the phone from my hand and slid it across the counter, out of my reach. "That won't be necessary. You're having a tragic heart attack, brought on by the excitement of Christmas dinner. So sad for a man your age." "Sarah knows," I choked out. "Sarah will say whatever I tell her to. She's very good at following directions when her children's future is at stake." My legs gave out. I slid down the cabinets to the cold tile floor. The kitchen spun around me, with Kevin at its center. "This didn't have to happen," he said conversationally. "You could have sold the house. You could have helped us. Instead, you chose to be stubborn." "I worked 40 years for that house," I whispered, "and now it's mine. Along with your savings, your pension, everything. Funny how death simplifies estate law." The vial on the table came back into focus. Something clear, tasteless, that would mimic a heart attack. "What did you give me?" Kevin glanced at his watch. "Does it matter?" "You'll be unconscious in about 10 minutes. Gone in 30. The coroner will rule it a heart attack. 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes to save myself. My phone was 8 feet away, an impossible distance. "Lily and Leo," I gasped. "They love me. They'll get over it. Children are resilient. Besides, they'll be too busy enjoying their inheritance to grieve for long." The casual cruelty was the final blow. My son was a monster, a stranger who felt nothing but pride in his own cleverness. But he made one mistake. He was still talking, and my phone, though out of reach, was still on. And I had managed to hit the call button before he took it. My last dialed number, George. The distant wail of sirens cut through the winter night. I pressed my own phone, which I'd managed to dial from my pocket while he was talking, tighter against my ear, watching through the kitchen window as red and blue lights painted the street. "They're here," I whispered to the dispatcher. "Police are arriving." "Stay on the line, sir," the calm voice replied. "Officers are at the door." Heavy footsteps pounded up the walkway. Sharp knocks echoed through the house. "Police, open up." From the dining room came the sound of scraping chairs, confused questions from the children, and Sarah's sharp gasp. "Officers, what's going on?" Kevin's voice was a performance of bewilderment. "It's Christmas Eve. We're having dinner." I heard the front door open and the entry of multiple officers. Professional voices asked for identification and demanded to speak with Bob Miller immediately. "My father's in the kitchen," Kevin said, his tone shifting. "Is he okay?" The kitchen door swung open. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by paramedics. The first, a woman with kind eyes, approached me. "Mr. Miller, I'm Officer Davis. We received a report that you've been poisoned." I held up the small glass vial with a shaking hand. rat poison, arsenic. I found it in the spice cabinet after the wine made me sick. Officer Davis took the bottle, placing it in an evidence bag. Her partner began photographing the scene. The person who did this, is he still here? My son, Kevin. He's in the dining room. The words felt unreal. From the other room, Kevin's voice rose in panic. Dad, what are you telling them? Officer Davis spoke into her radio. Suspect is present in the dining room with potential hostages. The children are innocent, I said quickly. His wife knew, but was coerced. The kids have no idea. Paramedics started checking my vitals, their calm efficiency a lifeline. I was going to make it. The kitchen door burst open. Kevin stood there, his face a mask of confusion, then realization, then cold rage. You called the cops on me? On Christmas Eve? In front of my kids? 2 officers immediately flanked him. Kevin's eyes locked on the evidence bag with the poison vial, and his expression crumbled. Kevin Miller, you're under arrest for attempted murder, Officer Davis said, her voice firm. You have the right to remain silent. This is crazy, Kevin stammered, but his eyes darted around looking for an escape. The handcuffs clicked shut with a sound of finality. His face went pale as the reality sank in. From the dining room came the sounds of children crying and Sarah sobbing. They shouldn't see this, I told Officer Davis. Social services is on the way. We'll make sure they're safe. As they led Kevin away, he stopped and looked at me one last time. I hope you're happy, he said quietly. You just destroyed your own family. No, Kevin. You did that the moment you decided money was more important than a human life. The paramedics helped me to my feet and guided me toward the waiting ambulance. Through the front window, I could see neighbors gathered on their lawns, staring at the flashing lights. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I saw Sarah holding both sobbing children as a social worker approached them. The family Kevin claimed to be protecting was now shattered by his greed. The ambulance doors closed, shutting out the sight of my broken life. February brought a crisp Chicago morning that felt like a new beginning. I stood in my kitchen, making coffee the way Eleanor had taught me, watching George carefully make his way up my icy driveway. The past 2 months had been a whirlwind. Kevin's trial was short. The evidence, including the recorded confession from my pocket dial to George, was damning. 15 years for attempted murder. Morning, survivor, George said, stomping snow from his boots. How are you? Grateful. The word came more easily now. Coffee's fresh. We had a new routine. George's daily visits, shared meals, and quiet talks about everything but the man in the state penitentiary. The doorbell rang at 9 o'clock sharp. Sarah stood on the porch with Lily and Leo, their bags packed for a weekend with Grandpa. The divorce was already finalized. Mr. Miller, she said, her voice still laced with shame, thank you again for this. They're my grandchildren, I said gently. This is their home, too. Lily and Leo rushed past her, already comfortable with the weekend routine. Homework at the kitchen table, projects in the garage, stories by the fire. Normal grandparent things that felt miraculous after what we had all endured. Did you finish the airplane, Grandpa? Leo asked, heading for the workbench. Waiting for the chief engineer to attach the wings. While the kids settled in, Sarah and I went over the paperwork. The educational trust for Lily and Leo was fully funded. Their college was paid for. Wayne's attempt to steal their future had ironically secured it. The charity donations are set up too, I told her, showing her the statements for veterans groups and the local hospital. Eleanor would have liked that. What about Kevin? She asked quietly. Do you ever think about seeing him? I watched Leo carefully align a Lego piece, his face a mask of concentration. I think about the boy he used to be. I miss that boy, but the man who tried to kill me? That man is a stranger. George nodded from his chair. Forgiveness doesn't require foolishness. The children ask about him sometimes, Sarah said. I don't know what to tell them. Tell them he made terrible choices and is facing the consequences. Tell them those choices don't define who they are. And tell them their grandfather loves them. Later, George and I worked in Eleanor's garden while the kids played in the snow. "You know," I said, leaning on my shovel, "Kevin was right about one thing. I was living in the past, keeping this house like a museum." George looked up from the rosebush he was pruning. "And now? Now it's a home again. It's full of laughter and people who are here because they love each other, not because they want something." Through the window, I could see Lily and Leo at the table, focused on their homework. Unlike their father, they would grow up knowing the difference between love and obligation. "You going to change the will again?" George asked. "Leave them the house?" "Eventually. When they're old enough to understand what it really means. Not property, but a place to build something that lasts." That evening, after Sarah picked up the children and George went home, I sat in Eleanor's chair by the window. The neighborhood was quiet. My phone rang. It was George, checking in as he always did. "Any regrets about not selling the house?" he asked. I looked around the room where Eleanor and I had shared a life, where my son had opened his presents, and where my grandchildren now felt safe and loved. "None whatsoever," I said. "This house survived one person trying to tear it down from the inside. It'll survive whatever comes next." After we hung up, I stepped onto the back porch. The winter air was sharp, the stars bright. Somewhere in a prison cell, Kevin was learning about consequences. But here, in the home he'd tried to steal, life was starting over. Justice, I realized, wasn't just about punishment. It was about protecting what was good and making sure it had a chance to grow. Eleanor would have understood that perfectly. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe, and tell us your thoughts in the comments below. To hear the next story, click on the video to your left. Thanks for listening.